I get to introduce our next panel. So 45Z is this government thing that's happening that kind of keeps getting kicked down the road. And I think a lot of us have been sitting here waiting, wondering what's going to happen and how we're going to work with our customers and take advantage of that important regulation that should be coming down. So we've got a great group of panelists that are going to talk about it and kind of discuss what's going on and what we're going to do about it. So I'm going to introduce Brant Flint on the Bushel team. Everyone give Brant a round of applause as he comes out. And Brant will give you an introduction to his panelists.
Thank you, Benny. Test, test. Hello. All right, Benny, bring out the hot sauce and chicken wings. That would be great. Hot ones. All right. Hi, everybody. Brant Flint on the Enterprise Account Management team. Here with some great panelists. Guys, why don't you go around and introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, I'm Jay Weber with Colchera. Background, I've been in agriculture my whole life. Technology side since 2019, but formerly a trader and merchandiser.
Jared Knock, we farm and ranch in eastern South Dakota. We've got cattle, sheep, and hogs, and corn, soybeans, oats, and a few forage crops. And I did what I do with all the throw pillows at my house, is immediately remove them and find a safe place away from me.
I'm Justin Mease. I'm with Verity Carbon Solutions. I've spent most of my career in renewable fuels, everything from buying the feedstocks to rolling to the facilities, the chemicals, as well as selling the in-fuel products to the marketplace.
Thanks, guys. And thanks for doing this, by the way. So just a quick poll of the audience. It's hard to see up here. Can we have a show of hands on, like, how many people here are familiar with the details of 45Z or maybe even sick of hearing about it? Just out of curiosity, like, hands raised, who understands what the program is about loosely? Okay, that is less than I was expecting. So we have some splaining to do. All right. The first question I have is kind of for everybody, but I'm just curious as to, why should we continue to pay attention to this? What's the big motivator for people to keep talking about this, and what is the excitement that it seems to always bring, even though we're always waiting for the additional detail? So I'm curious as to each one of you, like, what's the why should we be caring about and watching what's happening out there for 45Z and how it impacts each one of you guys?
I'll take a stab at it as a farmer. So I love to look back and I love to read about history, and I always thought it was strange to look back in history 100 years or 500 years or thousands of years, but not think hundreds of years or thousands of years ahead, right? What's the point of looking? If you can look back that far, what does it look like when it goes ahead? Really, the story of U.S. agriculture post-1970s, and we talk about this industrialized period that kind of manifests itself then, we're in a grain glut that has really only been majorly impacted by two things. That's the biofuels innovation and the massive Asian, primarily China, demand for soybeans and other feedstuffs that happen. And that one is kind of dwindling, right? We know it's kind of it already got to its peak and it's going down. And if we didn't have biofuels, I have little doubt that corn would still be occasionally priced in the ones. Rural South Dakota would probably look like rural Albania. The world that I grew up in the 80s and 90s probably wouldn't have changed much unless we kind of reset that and put that demand structure in. So when I was in high school was when biofuels and the first ethanol plants were being built in South Dakota. I remember going to an event by Howard, South Dakota. President Bush actually came. I was still in high school, so I was there in official FFA dress, and I was kind of a backdrop of the photo for him to, like, talk about the future of agriculture there. And I remember biofuels being sold to rural America, rural farmers in our part of the world as energy security, right? This was going to make sure that we never had to get involved in a foreign war in the Middle East ever again, right? It was in the backdrop of those two Iraq conflicts. That didn't work out, it seems like, because even now that we're a net energy exporter, we're still involved in policing the Middle East. But what happened is there was a coalition of the farmer groups and environmental groups that came together that made biofuels happen. They wanted a cleaner fuel. Farmers wanted a demand for their product. That coalition has been stale for a few decades now, right? And farmers keep coming back and saying, we want to get more biofuels, we want to get more biofuels. The environmental movement really hasn't wanted to go there with us. Look at the massive challenges we have of even getting E15 year-round on a continual basis. We've had emergency declarations for that for 7 of the last 8 years. We can't get it into law. There's stops there. However, one thing that was allowed to happen is that the coalition came together on 45Z, which says we're okay supporting biofuels to a higher degree, but here's what we want. Here's what, from the environmental side, we want. We want to see the feedstocks going into that and the efficiency of the process to be greater. We'll give you incentives for that. So in 2024, when the blender's tax credit expired, the industry came together and said, okay, if that's going to expire, how do we get some equivalent benefits? And they came up with 45Z, which is essentially, from a farmer perspective, allowing us to quantify the ecosystem benefits of the practices that we use in raising the feedstocks, corn, soybeans, and sorghum primarily, that go into biofuel production.
Yeah, I think for me, I'll talk from the originator standpoint or the ethanol plant. Even the commercials that originate, it's a new market, it's a new revenue stream, and I think it's really the entryway to other things down the road when you think about data attached to commodities, like data-enriched commodities. It's a new revenue stream and a new market in my mind.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can cover much more than what Jared and Jay said there, but the biggest thing I think about is traceability is an impacting element to value. And today, I think the first emergence you see on that is through carbon programs at the farm, through what could come with ag benefits as 45Z. You see it with some sign of compliance markets saying what you did or didn't do, right? Traceability is proving either. And so I think when you converge all of these things, a person's ability to communicate data efficiently, use it, harness it, and monetize it when there's somebody willing to pay for it is going to be a really important muscle to develop. And I think 45Z is going to be a really big impacting element to taking that to scale. And once you have one of those things happen, it becomes like toothpaste. It's hard to get back. And so once somebody sees this data in one area of their business, they start to project it or think about it in other areas. And so since renewable fuels, as Jared pointed out, is 40% of our corn or ag products coming off in renewable fuels, if there is value that comes through this, it's going to be a change for all of our products, not just renewable fuels.
Nice job, guys. Jared, one question I had for you specifically from the farmer perspective, and I know that you've been participating in these programs for years. I'm curious as to what do you see as some of the primary challenges from your perspective, not only within just 45Z and some of the more heavier requirements that the program is said to be requiring, but from like your experience, what's some of the hurdles that you have and see as a part of capturing that data and the data flow that would be required for that?
To me, and so I've participated in kind of the agricultural sustainability world in various aspects over the last 5 or 6 years, and it kind of started about 6 years ago. We run an ag retail business in addition to the farm in our local area, and I was picking up cover crop seed from our supplier, Milborn Seeds out of Brookings, which is a great company that you should get to know. And I was talking with the owner who happened to be out in the warehouse that day. At that time, it was a small team, about 12, 13 people that worked at the entire company. And we were talking about, and I said, Matt, I'm picking up The Economist, I'm looking at Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, and some of the biggest companies in the world, ExxonMobil, McDonald's, Walmart, they're talking about your products. They're talking about cover crops. They're talking about pollinator habitat. They're talking about all these things. And they keep talking about them as if they're not being used. And at that point, I was into almost a 10-year transition to help dozens and ended up being hundreds of farmers in my local area plant their first cover crops, do their first native grass restoration for pastures, plant down waterways. And it feels like the industry is talking about these things as if they're not happening. While they're happening every day, there's just a big disconnect from the people that are doing them and the people that actually want them done. So that led us on a journey to try to connect those dots in various different ways. And at this point, I would say that the adoption level at the farm is probably, teed up to happen as soon as the people who actually want these things finish writing their rules about what they mean. So the big holdup, and it is, and now it's involved in government too, is, okay, you want these things. We either are doing them or are willing to do them. We have access and can figure out how to do it. What are the rules? And I know that's what we're waiting on. And when those become clearer, I think it'll transition pretty fast.
Building on that, what do you guys see as, let's give an idea for like what the opportunity is. You know what I mean? Like, is there a way to size it and why people should be paying attention?
Yeah, so again, 45Z it's in law today. So I want to separate this a little bit. There's 45Z as the tax code. And it's a tax credit for renewable fuels plants. And so any value less than 50 CI starts to generate this tax credit. And that can either be used in that business or sold. And there's obviously a price discount when you do that. And so today it's there. What we're really talking about is the ag benefits to impacting that CI score into a greater value. And so the opportunity for that is, every 5 CI points that a production plant would drop is going to impact their ability to generate value for this 45Z. They're going to have costs associated to doing that, but if ag benefits are included, then the farmer is in an opportunity where their data is now worth something. The problem with this is that not every renewable fuel production plant is the exact same. You can have an ethanol plant that has a really high CI score that doesn't participate in 45Z, and therefore there isn't any value for them paying for ag benefits, whereas you could have others that there's a lot of value that they can generate for this. And that can be difficult for the farmer to understand. And there's also opportunities where for a certain plant, they generate value up to a certain point, and then after that, they have maxed out their benefits. They're not going to see anything additional, and so there's not value that they're going to transfer because they're not going to generate any more for it as well. And so I think one of the first starts for any of this is to be able to communicate through your supply shed. And that doesn't matter if you're a farmer, if you're a commercial, or if you're a renewable fuels plant. Communication is going to be really important and an impacting element to any level of success in any one of these programs. The other thing that's happening out there is traceability through compliance markets. So California's LCFS or Canada, ISCC, these markets also exist, and there is potential premiums that producers sell or get into when they sell into these markets. No different than as we talk about just basis premiums in grain today. And so there is data that they're asking for in those markets, and that's a change. And so really what you have to look at it is to say is, what is the value and traceability for my organization? And start to stack these benefits to say, how do we monetize it and how do we communicate what matters and what doesn't? So the value is big. I mean, there's a lot of money that's available to the plants that can do this. They're going to have to spread that cost between the participants in that supply shed that make it possible. And so how much ends back to the farmer is a lot of times going to come back to economics of supply and demand, right? So if you're in a supply shed that has a lot of participation, that's got really low CI scores, people are doing a lot of things, that might be different than if you're in a supply shed where you're an outlier. You're unique relative to your neighbors. And so I think all of that's going to get worked out over time, just like any program. But I think the thing that I always hold on to is that the owner of that original data is the farmer. And so if you want to pull that data, if that data is worth something, then there's going to have to be a transfer of value for that. Just like there's going to be a transfer of value to a commercial that's enabling their growers to communicate that data, or for them to monetize or maximize the market they sell it into. Like we talked about earlier, not every ethanol plant or biofuel facility might see value, And so for a commercial, being able to bring in grain from your growers, identify which bushels have certain value components to it from their traceability, and being able to target it to certain ethanol plants or biofuel facilities that are in line or can generate value from it is going to be really important. And so that's why we always get to is the data part is you can have all this data, but your ability to communicate it efficiently will be your biggest impacting element to creating value, because having it in spreadsheets, having it in PDF copies, having it saved somewhere is not going to be it. You're going to have to be able to readily communicate it. And that's why I think what Bushel is doing across their entire platform is really innovative for the future, is what they're taking is saying, hey, let's get out of what we used to do and figure out how to communicate value more efficiently across all the different market spectrums.
The only thing I would really add to that, and I'll kind of answer the question on the value that's created, I don't think anybody knows. It's a new market. It's going to be created by the market. So what that premium is, either they're going to get enough that makes enough sense for the farmer to sell the grain or the commercial to originate it. If there's not enough value there, they're just not going to do it. So it's really on people like sitting in this room that's going to decide what that value is. Plants are all different because their location, when you talk about LCFS, where they sell their fuel to, the value you create for a plant in Nebraska is going to be different than one in Ohio or Indiana, just because on where they sell their ethanol into and the value of that crop. So it's defending dollars from that standpoint with the LCFS, be able to participate in those markets. So there's a lot more value for plants further west. So
here's the value as I calculate it on the farm that is potential, knowing that everybody's got to have a cut out of this pie. Corn goes into an ethanol plant generally around a CI score of 30, okay? That varies on your location, but just call it 30 for simple math. The GREET model, which is the one that's being used, allows for about a total of 30 to 33 points of reduction total if you implement all 4 of the major practices that you can do. And that would be cover cropping, no or reduced till, split nitrogen application, nitrate inhibitors, okay? If I was to do all 4 of those things, and manure application too, that's the trickiest one, but manure application. So if I was to do all of those things, which we do in some capacity and are willing to do all those things, I could say my corn goes from a 30 delivered at the plant with no, that's the baseline, to about a 0, right? And that's a little bit pie in the sky, but that's actually achievable in a lot of situations. If I do that, that triggers the ability for that biorefinery to then take an up to 2 cents per gallon per CI point reduction tax credit. So if I go from 30 and I take it to 0 and I drop it off, that gives them a 30-point reduction that they can get 2 cents per gallon on. A gallon of corn generally makes about 2.7 gallons of ethanol. We're going to use 2.5 to be conservative and also to be easier math. That would equate to $1.50 of tax credits eligible for every bushel of corn that comes in 30 points below the baseline, okay? Now, no one's going to get $1.50 a bushel. There's a lot of people that have to do a lot of work in the meantime to make all that happen. If it's half, that's probably bigger than most of the swings we're going to see in a marketing year for the foreseeable future, potentially, without a weather event. If it's half, it's 75 cents a bushel. I'll go through a lot of hoops to get 75 cents a bushel, okay? I'll do all the practices for 75 cents a bushel. We're at 200 APH, that's $150 an acre, okay? If the whole thing comes together, like it can and will, hopefully over the next couple of years, year or two, then you look at that in the macro level, what does that mean? If there was 100% compliance, arguably will not happen, but there's enough incentives to actually drive a lot of change. We produce about 16.5 billion gallons of ethanol at 60 cents a gallon. That's about $10 billion a year. I'm not sure how to quantify money anymore. I'm not sure what money even means. But $10 billion a year is the equivalent size of the entire U.S. corn seed industry. So when you think about $10 billion, think about everybody that you know that works in the corn seed selling industry on the ground, the facilities and the companies that drive that, the sponsorships they have from local baseball games to major sports arenas. It's that kind of a potential impact. And today, it's a zero in the countryside. None of that money is flowing out and eligible. In the future, potentially at full manifestation, it's a $10 billion industry that essentially doesn't exist today.
Building on that, it's not as easy as flipping a switch due to the data, as Justin touched on and you're getting to. I'm curious as to, like, when it comes to like the commercial challenges to get this, make it real, right? Like, Jay and Justin, what do you guys think are some of the challenges that you've heard and talked to from the agribusiness perspective to get this off the ground?
I think there's several. I think one, though, is, people think about 45Z and they go farmer to ethanol plant, and they forget about how grain actually moves. There's grain that touches a couple commercials before it goes to an ethanol plant. And you've got to pass that data, as Justin was saying, all the way through the supply chain, but a commercial doesn't want to share their origination customer list with the plant. So you've got to find a way to pass that data through for an auditor, for the buyer of the credits, to be able to monetize them without the plant seeing a lot of that data. I would say that's probably the biggest hurdle, is being able to trust the process and trust that your data is going to be protected to receive that monetizable amount.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be the hardest thing is change, right? I had somebody tell me about a year ago. He said, "Justin, you've got a little bit of an uphill battle here. You're trying to go against about 60 years of us trying to make something a commodity, so that we could trade it globally and just to be accepted everywhere. And so now we're trying to put fingerprints on this and make it a differentiated product." And so change is a really hard thing for all of us individually. I would say this industry that we're specifically working in, change is really difficult, and it's easy to understand why. I'm from Iowa. One of my good friends farms, and he says, "I only get 40 chances at this, Justin." He's like, "So I'm not going to make any drastic changes because what I'm doing and got us here is really important for me to understand." And that thought process is really rooted all the way through this industry, right? If you're at a commercial, you exist today because you've blocked and tackled the right way. And now somebody's telling you that you need to understand traceability, you need to understand the supply shed, you need to understand renewable fuels, which if you're just getting into renewable fuels compliance, I'm sorry, but it's a lot, and it doesn't follow logic. Like, that's one of the hard things with this is, we talked about ILUC being removed out of the program here. We don't have a land use change problem in the United States. We have other problems, but that's not one of them. But now we're being asked in renewable fuels to prove against land use change. And so somebody would say, well, that doesn't make sense. It's like, well, the rules didn't ask if it was supposed to make sense, maybe. But that's the rules at which that we're at. And so there's a lot of things that we have to understand about these. But if we do and we embrace change, to what Jared said, there's a lot of value potential out there. And if you look at any one of the supply chains, for any one group to monetize this or maximize that value creation, the largest impacting element is participation. You could live and be in one of the best supply sheds for low carbon intensity or farmers adopting practice or capable of adopting practice changes. But if you don't have participation, you're not going to monetize it. And so being able to do that easily, and again, this is why Verity partnered with Bushel, is we saw what Bushel was doing is to make it really easy for growers to communicate that data in an efficient manner. Because if you ask them to do 40 hours worth of work to put it into a spreadsheet when you don't know what that's going to be worth, it's a really hard ask. And so you need to make it really easy and transparent for people to communicate things. And as Jay said, in a way that protects data, and that's tricky.
Last question, since we only have 7 minutes. So if you, and this is both for agribusiness and farmer, so I'm curious as to when we want to make some recommendations or, how do we properly plan now, knowing that feel like we've been talking about this for 2 years. But it's getting closer and closer. It is law. So it's getting closer and closer. And, when it actually does land, like, what should we be doing now to ensure that we're ready for when it does land?
So I'll talk to different entities in the room. If you're a farmer, start to understand your data is hopefully going to be worth something. And start to understand, as Jared talked about, the impacting elements as it relates to 45Z, but understand that's just one program. There's other ones, and so you need to be working with people that can help educate you on these things. If you're a commercial, I actually think that you are in an extremely exciting position at this point because of your relationship with growers is different than what a lot of renewable fuels producers have. And so your ability to bring in grain and mass balance that and be able to send that out to the person that values it the most, I think is going to be a really, really important part, I think, as Jay was talking about. And then if you're a renewable fuels plant, get out and communicate. Talk to your growers that you work with directly. Talk to your commercials. Help them understand what matters to you. Help them understand when it's not going to matter to you, because that's just as important. And help people understand that you don't know everything, but you do want to monetize this and create value when that option exists. And just be transparent, because I think today, when there's uncertainty, a lot of times we want to not communicate because we don't want to give something up in a negotiation or a thought process. But I think right now, more than any time, it's to communicate through your supply shed what's important to you and help people understand that. And I think that if you do that well, when something does break, you're going to be in a really good spot.
I think for me, for the commercial side, I would say that some of the opportunity for the commercial side would be if you understood and got in front of this, like Justin was saying, I think there's some opportunity to go out and get some new origination contracts with plants that do them, or at least bring the solution to the plants, saying, I understand the problem you're trying to solve. We think we can help you solve it. It's a new revenue stream there. The other piece, I think, is LCFS. I know we've been talking about, but really that's the base layer. If you think of a pan of lasagna, that's the base layer that's needed, right? The shape file is the base layer. The farming practices are the different layers on top of it. We know we need the base layer for 45Z. LCFS is the base layer. The other pieces, we don't know what we need. So that is an opportunity. Today, we're working with plants solving the LCFS solution, and there is premiums being paid, people that took advantage of it. So that's an active market today you can go take advantage of.
So here's what we're doing on our farm to potentially position ourselves in the right way for this outcome, and it fits with the overall strategy. So we're in a moderate to aggressive expansion of our cow-calf operation because of the market signals. Crop aftermath grazing is really important to that. So not disking our corn stalks in the fall and actually using grazing instead as residue management is really important to us. So we're putting in new fences, we're adding to the cow herd, we're making sure that we're getting a better use of that. So that's an enabling tool that actually allows us to do that. Cover crops, in addition to that corn crop, is giving us a couple things. One, when properly established, we're reducing our protein supplementation by 25 to 30 cents a day by adding a 5-species cover crop mix on the standing corn stalks as we're grazing them. So we no longer need to have to chase those stupid white tubs all around when they blow away all winter long. But we can just get our protein supplementation that way. And we're expanding the grazing season in the spring by going out to grass on the rye cover crops on certain fields in the early part of April instead of the middle of May like we would our native pastures. So that fits. So if that's where we want to go anyway, this is also an opportunity. I think that there's going to be, when this comes out, there's going to be a huge subscription interest in programs like EQIP and CSP. They're already oversubscribed. There was a couple years in the Biden administration where they dumped lots of dollars in, that 70 to 80% of people that applied got there. That's not the historic norm. You go back 5 to 6 years, you were about a 10 to 15% acceptance rate on CSP in South Dakota for a stretch. This year, it was closer to 25%, but nationally, it's about 20%, meaning if you go for the NRCS EQIP contracts, you're probably going to get turned away away unless you're comprehensive enough, unless you're coached up on how to score well enough in cart to actually get across the board. So we took 1,000 acres that were best in proximity to the grazing areas that we have for cows in the wintertime, and we shoved that into an equip contract, put all the bells and whistles on it that line up actually almost uncannily well to 45Z compliance, and signed up for a 5-year contract. On those 1,000 acres, the payment's about $100 an acre coming in from equip contracts. If there's no adoption of 45Z, I've already got a very reasonable, incentive to make that adoption anyway, to cover any other increased expenses that we may have or potential ghost or phantom yield loss that might come from this in the transition period. It just so happens to match up to the full point reduction on 45Z as a potential outcome. That allows us to go to our biorefiner, and they have a lot of questions. Is this going to be permanent? Will farmers want to get in and out of it? Will they continue to bring our corn here? And we say, okay, we're bringing you 100,000 bushels of corn. We're fully ready for an audit because we're already auditable in the equip system anyway. We'll give you any data that you want. I may be a little different, but I think I might be representing a younger generation too that says, I'm so inundated with, I no longer think that my data is secure in any way, fashion, or form or whatsoever. And also, I don't think I'm doing anything that special. I'd rather monetize my data than hide it, to be honest with you. So I'll monetize it if you really want it, and this is a good way to do that, because I don't really think that anything that I do on the internet, whether it's with anybody, is secret for long anyway. So if you can show me how to monetize it, sign me up. I'm more worried about the incentive than I am about confidentiality, but that's my personal opinion.
Excellent. Guys, thank you so much for being on the panel.